Okay, good evening, everybody. Tonight's class is unique in a couple of formats. First of all, because I'm sitting here in person with a few participants in person, this is the first time in over a year that the Tuesday night Torah studies class has resumed in person. L'chaim to that, to real in-person study of Torah. L'chaim.
I like the pun, resume.
Resume, we're resuming the in-person, but we're still on Zoom for those who can't make it physically, either because of they're too far away or for other reasons that they can't come in. And please God, going forward, as more and more things go back to in-person, we will continue to have what we can virtually as well, so more people could participate. Obviously not Shabbat and holiday prayers and services because it's forbidden at that time, but classes and so on, we can do in person and online. And of course, if you're able to, we'd prefer to have you in person, but if you can't, at least there's a way to participate. And tonight's class is also very special because it's the first Tuesday night class in our new shul downstairs. So there's no excuses now, there's no stairs, and there's no trouble for anybody to participate. You can literally roll in with a wheelchair if you need to come on in. And thank God for us having this new beautiful space. And we have my mother here with us, who's coming. No one sees you, but believe me when I say it. Oh, okay, I can turn the camera. There you are. That's my mother, who's here all the way from New York, from Rockland County, which is on the way to upstate New York. And her and my stepdad have schlepped out here in an RV that we call, Chabadnikim call a mitzvah tank. And they cruised, and they parked in our driveway, and they're here with us through the holiday of Shavuot next week, which we're gonna talk about tonight. But first, Reuven, can you reach the calendar behind you? Sorry to keep on troubling you there. First, I want to talk about something on the calendar, and then we're going to show you in the Torah something unique about tonight's date, and then we'll take it a little further. So as you all know, we're in the year 5781 from the creation of the world. And we are now in the secular date, March. Sorry. See, it's good to have my mother here. We are in, just seeing who's listening, okay? We are in May. Of course, my mother knows because just 2 days ago was Mother's Day. So May is well known amongst Jewish mothers. But May 11 is today's secular date. But let's look at the Jewish date. It's 29 Iyar, which means it's the final day of the month of Iyar, the Jewish month. Incidentally, it's the yard site of my great-grandmother, as it says here in our calendar, Sylvia Gugig. That's my mother's maternal grandmother. So it's my mother's mother's mother. And she passed away on this date 49 years ago, in 1972. Her name was Sheva Yita Bas Moshe Yaakov. May her memory be for a blessing. We dedicate tonight's class to her honor and memory. We had Kaddish recited for her earlier today at the 2 p.m. Mincha at Herzog. So that's today. Tonight and tomorrow begins a new month. And if you look on the calendar, you'll see it's shaded, the box. Every shaded box on our calendar means it's a significant day. For example, next week, there's 2 days shaded. That's the holiday of Shavuot. And of course, every Shabbat is shaded. And then if you turn back, you'll see the days of Passover are shaded and so on and so forth. Why is this shaded? Because it's Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the new Jewish month. The months, of course, I'm sure you all know, follows the moon. The Jewish calendar is lunar. So there's a cycle to the moon. The moon waxes and wanes. The beginning of the cycle, when the moon, it's on the right side as a crescent, is first, quote, born, and then begins to grow. That's Rosh Chodesh. So tonight, if it wasn't overcast and it's a clear night, you might see a little sliver, and then tomorrow night more so. And this continues waxing until the middle of the Jewish month, middle of the lunar cycle, which the Jewish month follows, which is the full moon. It's the 15th of the month. For example, every single year, and this will work forever, the night of Passover Seder, go outside and look up in the sky, you'll see a full moon, because the night of Passover is always the 15th of the month. That's when the Exodus happened. Full matzah. There you go. And then the same with the holiday of Sukkot is always the 15th of the month. Then the moon begins to wane, and it goes to the left until it completely becomes, until a small sliver to the left, the crescent, and it disappears. I don't want to get off topic, but it's interesting that the Muslims, who also follow the lunar cycle, chose the crescent as their symbol, the symbol of Islam, like it's on top of mosques and so on and so forth. But what's unique and interesting is that it's to the left, which actually shows on the moon waning, whereas we emphasize the beginning of the month, Rosh Chodesh, which is the beginning of the month. It's just an observation. I don't have any deep interpretations to it, but it's just something that came to mind. So what happens after the moon completes its cycle? It then resumes, but it asks, and it starts again every single month forever and ever and ever. How long is the cycle? It's actually 29 and a half days. It's not a full 30 days, which is why more or less every other month alternates between a 29-day month and a 30-day month. Now, why am I telling you all this? First of all, it's fascinating. But secondly, because it turns out the way we have now a fixed calendar, the month of Iyar that we conclude as we speak, the sun setting now on 29 Iyar is the final day of the month. There's never a 30 Iyar. The new month that we start tonight and tomorrow, the month of Sivan, is month. Okay, now the month prior, Nisan, is also always a 30-day month. But when the calendar wasn't fixed, which means the way the calendar is biblically is that when witnesses see the sighting of the moon, God commanded Moshe, you shall count, you shall follow the calendar, meaning when Jewish people see the moon, they would go to the high court in Jerusalem with testimony and say, last night, because testimony was only given during the day, the Bet Din was only open during the day, that's the only time they could hear a testimony, not just for convenience, but halachically it had to be daytime. And they said, last night we saw such and such, and they interrogated them, they separated them and made sure that what they saw wasn't a UFO or the guy had too many l'chaims and his wife hit him over the head. And if they each described the same thing and in the right part of the sky, then the high court, the Bet Din, would announce that it's Rosh Chodesh. Therefore, some months could have 29, some months could have 30, depending on when the sighting took place and when it was announced as Rosh Chodesh. If that's the case, then we have a fascinating idea, and that is that Shavuos, which is the upcoming holiday that we're going to discuss tonight, it begins with a fixed calendar. It begins on the 6th of Nisan, which is this coming Sunday night and Monday. But the Torah doesn't actually give a date for it. Rather, the Torah says after the day of the morrow of the day of rest, in other words, after the first day of Passover, 16 Nisan, after the first day of Passover, when the Omer offering was brought, a barley offering, you shall count 50 days, 7 complete weeks. And the 50th day, Tisbru Chamishim Yom, the 50th day, we just had in the Torah portion a few weeks ago, the 50th day should be the holiday of Atzeret. It should be a holiday, a festival. It doesn't say anything in the Torah about the giving of the Torah. It happens to coincide with the fact that the Torah was given on the 6th of Nisan, of Sivan, the month that we start tonight. But as it turns out, in the time when the calendar was established by witnesses, the 50th day from the onset of Passover could be the 5th of Nisan, of Sivan, because if the 2 months only had 29 days, or if the 2 months had 30 days, then it could be the 7th of Sivan. And if 1 month had 29, 1 month 30, then it would fall on that. But not necessarily was the holiday of Shavuot, which is after 7 complete weeks, on the same day that the Torah was given. We're going to talk about the significance of that soon. I just wanted to give a general overview. Now let's look inside the Chumash for a moment. where we speak about this very day, tonight and tomorrow, in the Torah. So if you have a Chumash, a Bible near you, please open to Exodus chapter 19, verse 1. If not, hopefully you'll believe me and trust me in what I am reading to you. So, chapter 19 is in the midst of discussing the prelude to the revelation of God at Sinai, which of course we celebrate this coming Monday and Tuesday with the holiday of Shavuot. And it's telling us a little history and background to what happened. And the Torah states as follows. Verse 1, in the third month from the exodus of the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, Chodesh Hashlishi, on this day, they arrived at the wilderness of Sinai. Now, it doesn't say what day it was. It just says on this day, the third month on this day. Let's continue. They journeyed from Rephidim and arrived at the wilderness of Sinai, which is where the Sinai desert and therefore the Mount Sinai was and is, and encamped in the wilderness. And Israel encamped there opposite the mountain, or another translation is at the bottom of the mountain. So then the next few verses continues to discuss the preparation for the giving of the Torah. The days of preparation were 3 days, known as Shlosh Yemei Hagbala, where they had to spiritually prepare themselves. And then there was a day that God made them into the holy nation, and the chosen nation. And then eventually the Torah was given on the 6th day. Actually, the sages say that Moses pushed it off an extra day. That's another discussion for another time. It's a fascinating topic that's analyzed in the Talmud. But be it as it may, what we have here is that today's date, tonight and tomorrow, Rosh, Chodesh, Sivan, is clearly mentioned in the Torah. How so? Third month. When did the calendar begin? Not 5, 7, 8, 1 years ago. That's the creation of the world. That's Rosh Hashanah. When did the Jewish calendar begin? The Jewish counting of following the moon? The 1st of Nisan, 2 weeks before the Exodus. When did they start counting 50 days? After the first day of the Exodus, meaning the 16th day of this new calendar. So do a simple math. The 16 days of the new calendar, plus you fast forward to 50 days, ends up that the Torah was given in the third month of the new calendar. So what's the first day of the new calendar? Sivan. The names, by the way, came much later. The names are from Babylonian origin. In the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, it just uses numbers. Month 1, month 2, month 3, the first month, the second month, the third month. So the Torah was given in the third month, and more specifically on the 6th day of the third month, which happens to coincide now with the fixed calendar with the 50th day after the beginning of Passover. This is all very, very significant for a phenomenon that has only basically come up in our generation, known as the international dateline. If somebody travels across the international dateline, for example, let's say somebody goes from here to Australia, what ends up happening? You lose a day. You get on a flight at LAX at whatever, 10 p.m. on tonight. Okay, today is the 44th day of the Omer. So the 44th day of the Omer, you get on a flight. You want to go for Shavuot, instead of going to Oxnard to eat cheesecake, you want to go to Australia. Wonderful. You found a good deal, you get on the plane, and 14 hours later, you arrive in Sydney or Melbourne, Australia, or New Zealand. And of course, you flew over the international date line, which is kind of an arbitrary line that was created by many countries. I read somewhere it was like in the 1840s. They got together and they said, we have to do this because they saw there was trade and travel. So we have to decide where it's the day before, the day afterwards. And they chose Greenwich Village as the meridian. Did I get that word right? The meridian. Prime meridian. And then 180 degrees from there is the international date line. So the east and west, and that's how they decided it. And of course, the Pacific was a convenient place because nobody lives there, but it does cut around countries. If you look at it, because some countries want to be the same day as the other parts of the country. So it's not a straight line. But be it as it may, as a result of this, if you're traveling from LA to California, the West Coast, to further west, to Australia, the amazing feat of the airplane is that you can reach there in less than a full day, 14 hours. When you land, you left Monday night, when you land, it's Wednesday. Welcome to Australia, it's Wednesday. All right, it's cute. You jet lag, it's cute. You lost a day of your life. There's a problem though, halachically. Because what ended up happening here is that night when you go to shul and everybody's counting the 46th day of the Omer with a blessing in God's name, you, the night before, were in LA where you counted 44 days with a blessing. What do? Do you lie? Do you miss a day? Do you skip ahead? And conversely, the other way around, if you're an Australian, you're coming to the United States, you're coming east, you gain a day. So you leave on Monday at 10 a.m. and when you land, it's Monday at 6 a.m. But you were on the plane for, your cycle went through a whole nother day. So this is a fascinating topic. There's different opinions how to deal with it. The Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe, already back in the 40s, was vocal on this before many others. And till this day, not everybody follows the Rebbe's opinion, but he said it's the most logical, which is, and this is the point, the Torah does not have a date for Shavuos. You shall count 7 complete weeks. When is your count? That goes by where you, not what people around you are doing. If you arrive in Australia, you're on a different count. And as a result, you'll actually need to keep Shavuos, depending on which way you're going, either a day earlier or a day later. And it's very, very complex because you also have to do what the community is doing. It's a separate Jewish concept. So you need to do a little bit of a hybrid where you got to keep the holiday, but like for a man still has to put on tefillin, but you can't do any work and because it's not a weekday and it's very complex and it's best not to do it. It's best to avoid it by either returning to the whatever zone you were. If you have to travel between Passover and Shavuot, you go back, or going the long way around, which is a schlep and a half, but this way you don't cross the international date line. The point that I'm getting at, though, with this discussion is that Shavuos is a very personal experience. We need to receive the Torah on the day that we complete the 7 complete counts. And that's very individualistic. By the way, this does not pertain to Shabbat and other holidays. You could say, wait, if I lost a day, then I didn't have 6 days a week you shall work and on the 7th you shall rest. So let me do Shabbat on a different day. No, that's not a separate issue because that's very clear in Jewish law that you have to follow what everyone around you is doing. Same thing with other holidays. It says Passover should be on the 15th day. So you happen to have lost a day leading up to the 15th. It doesn't matter. Now it's the 15th day in Australia or the other way around. And that's what everyone's sitting down at the Seder. You lost a day or you gained a day of your life. That's irrelevant. But with counting, you need to have 7 complete days. So on this day, they arrived at Sinai, and the word this day, Bayoim Hazeh, is the same expression that's used for Rosh Chodesh and other instances in the Torah. So we have what's called Hekesh, which means when we use one word in one place and another word in another place, the terminology is identical, then we could confer similarities between them. This is one of the 13 principles how the Torah is interpreted. So even though the Torah doesn't say it was Rosh Chodesh, it says the 3rd month. What day of the 3rd month, it doesn't say, but it says on this day. From other instances, we know on this day, by Yom Hazeh means Rosh Chodesh, therefore it means the same here. In other words, tonight and tomorrow is the day the Jews arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai. By the way, this is a class in and of itself, because the Torah doesn't tell us anything for just historical purposes. There's an important lesson to it. And it attaches great significance to this day of the first day of Sivan, that they prepared for the giving of the Torah specifically on this day, which shows them renewal, the new moon, as I mentioned in the beginning, a new beginning, which is in order to get the Torah, you have to have a new beginning. Also, the moon, when it first starts, represents bittul, self-nullification, self-effacement. In order to receive the Torah, you have to have that approach of I'm only like the moon that's a receiver. I don't have any light of my own. It's just a reflection of the sun. The sun is God and the Torah, and we are just a receiver like the moon.
Like the wilderness. Parsha.
Correct. Also, same idea. The location of it, the date of it, all of that teaches us a similar lesson. And the fact that Mount Sinai was low, humility, it all ties in similar to that idea. But the other thing that happened, which is of great significance, is the fact that for the first time, and unfortunately for the last time until they came about 40 years later to the Holy Land, which our thoughts and prayers and our hearts are with our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land, that God should watch over them and protect them. And there should be peace, true and everlasting peace in Israel. So we should give a little charity and say an extra prayer in honor of that, L'chaim, that God should protect Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land of Israel. So it says that unique to that moment was Jewish unity. Now, when we say Jewish unity, we mean not just that all Jews recognize each other as brothers and sisters, but that they were completely unified. It says, Ki ish echad b'lev echad, Rashi comments from the Medrash, they were like one person with one heart. And a prerequisite to receiving God's divine blessings and receiving the Torah is being unified as one. And where do we see this in the verse? Because it says, Vayachanu b'midbar, they, plural, they, and in Hebrew, not by Yichan, but Vayachanu, they, plural, encamped in the desert at the foot of Sinai, which makes sense to say plural because the Torah not long before this said that there were 600,000 men ages 20 to 60, plus obviously children under 20, plus seniors over 60, plus women. So the estimate is that it was somewhere about 3.5 million Jews, men, women, and children, or if you want to be technical, Hebrews, that were about to become the Jewish nation with the giving of the Torah. So clearly you should use a plural expression that they encamp. That's a lot of people to travel and to camp at the foot of the mountain. But then the next few words throws us off because it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Ahar. They encamped there opposite the mountain. Israel encamped there. But in Hebrew, Vayichan is singular expression. Moments before it said Vayachanu, they encamp. All of a sudden it becomes Vayichan in verse 2 of chapter 19. That's grammatically incorrect. And we know the Torah is very precise and careful with its wording. Why would it use a singular expression? So as I mentioned, our sages teach us, and you can see here the footnote points it out the bottom left of 401. The verb is in the singular in contrast to the previous verbs. This is to teach that the huge multitude of people encamped like a single person with a single desire. For Israel to rise to its highest calling, it must be unified. Only when it was united in its goal of hearing the word of God could it receive the Torah. And that's a very important lesson on this day, tonight and tomorrow, the 1st of Sivan, that for us to properly receive the Torah, we have to be united as one, which in general is, of course, always a very, very important lesson. Because, good evening, welcome. Because at the end of the day, Jewish unity is what makes us strong. That's why, for example, when there's, as we speak, sadly, challenging times in Israel. So what our response to it is we feel unified with them. We follow the news, but not just, God forbid, to hear bad news and get depressed, but to feel for them, to pray for them. Our thoughts and minds are with them. We give extra tzedakah, we say an extra prayer, and so on and so forth. So that's what the Jewish people did when they stood at the foot of Sinai. They encamped as one with one heart, a singular expression, tonight and tomorrow on the 1st of Sivan, which is a very, very special day. So that's thought number one. Welcome. We have a bunch of people on Zoom, so we're kind of doing a hybrid in-person plus also. All right, Zoomers, can you hear me? Are you good? You're also quiet. I know I muted you, but you can unmute and ask or share if you want. This is not broadcast. You're good? I see a thumbs up. Yeah, well, God forbid we're not finished with the Torah, but we're going to set it aside for a moment. Yes, that was the verses in the Torah that speak about tonight in the Jewish calendar. Now let's go a little bit deeper in the Hasidic teachings. although of course a lot of what I shared is also based on the Hasidic teachings. But here we're going to read from Torah Studies, which is Discourses of the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, adapted by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. Here it says Chief Rabbi of Britain. Not only is he the former Chief Rabbi of Britain, but unfortunately, as of a few months ago, he is also of blessed memory, Rabbi Dr. Lord Jonathan Sachs. So he translated some of the Rebbe's talks to English and adapted it. So here on a talk of Shavuot, page 227, we're going to elaborate a little bit further. Rabbi Dr. Lord. Yeah.
Sir, yeah.
He was knighted.
I think Rabbi Sachs was also.
Was knighted, yeah. Yeah, and that's when the Queen famously said, "Why is this night different than all other nights?" Okay, so on page 227 in Torah Studies, we have here a talk about Shavuot. And we're going to explore a little bit more this concept that it's the third month, because as I mentioned, tonight and tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh in the Jewish calendar. It's the beginning of a new month. But also, it's the day that the Jewish people encamped at the foot of Sinai. Just recapping here for those who recently joined in person or online. I see some new participants. And it was a preparation for the giving of the Torah, the encampment at the foot of Sinai. The fact that the Torah tells us this is significant, and the fact that the Torah says when, that it was on the third month. So that's what we're going to explore tonight, why the Torah was given on the third month. Maybe we'll give everybody, like we used to do in the good old days when we got together in person, we actually had sharing. They say sharing is caring. Should we read a little bit? Reuven, you want to start? Okay, I'm gonna turn the cameras on you. Ah!
Well, don't look at your.
No. Seeing is believing. Okay. Let's see if we can do this carefully.
Believing is believing. Seeing is seeing.
Okay. Can you see the beautiful face of one of our Levite? I was about to say the Levite, but we have another Levite here. Okay. So Reuven, you can start 227 about the third month.
Oh, so we'll skip the introduction. Okay. The third month. The giving of the Torah took place in the month of Sivan, the third month. Since this was clearly part of the divine plan, there must be a significant connection between the event and the date, between Torah and the third month. The point is made explicitly in the Talmud Shabbos, page 88a. Blessed be the merciful one who gave a threefold Torah to a threefold people through a third born on the third day of the third month. Is it on the third day? I don't know. The third month. Well, we'll see.
Moses is the third born?
Yeah, he had an older brother and sister. Miriam and Aaron. Yeah. The figure 3 is the constant motif. The Torah is in 3 parts: the 5 books, the prophets, and the writings. Torah, Nevi'im, Kesuvim. Israel consists of 3 kinds of Jews: good, bad, and Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael. Moshe was born third after Miriam and Aaron. Clarified there. The Torah was given in the third month on the third day of the Israelites' separation from their wives. That's a good thing to be able to count from 3. Why then the figure 3? Surely the Torah was intended to be unique and to reveal the oneness of God. Number 1 is what we would have expected. So to take this point further, the principal event of the third month was the giving of the Torah in itself. The commandments as such, all 3 of them, were not an entirely new disclosure. There had been commandments before: the 7 Noahide laws, circumcision, and the things that were commanded at Mara. Sinai, there was also the don't eat the sciatic nerve. Sinai certainly.
What a nerve for you to bring that up.
I hear you. It comes right after. It's in the chinuch. Sinai certainly changed the nature of a mitzvah, but the idea of a mitzvah was not new, but the Torah was. And the difference between Torah and the commandments is this. Through a mitzvah, one becomes unified in the face of God's will as a chariot to its rider.
Nullified after.
Nullified, thank you. Thank you. But through Torah, we become one with God. The two things are not the same. A chariot has no will other than that of its rider, but chariot and rider are not one. The innovation at Sinai was radical. Now the Jew could become at one with God. And if so, we must ask again, why is 3 not 1? It's symbol.
Very good. Thank you, Ruven. So to recap, we see a lot of 3s in connection with the giving of the Torah. First and foremost, tonight's date. Tonight, we begin the new month in the Jewish calendar, which is the 3rd month, Sivan, after the Exodus, and that's the month the Torah was given. Secondly, who gave the Torah? Moshe, who was the 3rd. Thirdly, the Torah consists of 3 parts: the Tanakh, what the non-Jews call the Old Testament, the Torah, Nevi'im, and Kesuvim, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. The 19 books of the Old Testament are 3 parts. And the Jewish people are divided into 3 parts as well. We have Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, the priests, the Levites, and the Israelites, the different categories of Jewish people. So there must be a special connection to the number 3. And we started explaining that 3 is something special about a unity of 3, specifically more so than 1. So let's unpack this for a moment. We all know that there's a religious word with 3 that is very un-Jewish, the Trinity. Trinity is 3. For us, we have lahavdil, we have monotheism. Mono is 1. Monotheism is a belief in one God, creator God, finished. What's the most important line in the Jewish tradition? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Here is the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. One, and there's nothing else. Now that's true with regards to God. But the reality is that God created a world. And when he created a world, we still say, Ein od milvado, there's nothing else besides God, even after the world was created. But nevertheless, God created the world in such a way that his true unity is concealed. Case in point, I mentioned this on Shabbat, the name for the world, the name for the world in Hebrew is concealment. Olam melashon helam. The word olam means concealment because the world by definition conceals godliness. Which name of God, which means which manifestation of God created the world? Elokim. Elokim is the name of God of concealment, of judgment, of discipline, as opposed to Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the name of God, the tetragrammaton, the name of God that always was and always will be. Haya, Hava, and Yeh. That's a conjugation. Yud Kei Vav Kei is Haya, Hava, Yeh. So we're getting a little Kabbalistic here, but the point of this is that God in his essence, of course, is one, and in truth, there is nothing else besides God. But that was not the whole point of creation. If God wanted it to be that way, he could have not created the world. And then obviously he's one, because there's nothing else besides him. The chiddush, the novelty, is that God wanted there to be a world which by definition feels like a separate existence of him. Yet our challenge is to reveal godliness in the world. So let's bring this idea to relationships, because ultimately everything about God and us is a relationship. So in a prototype of relationship is a husband and wife, which not just because we're familiar with that, but also because that's what our sages use as a metaphor. Like Song of Songs from King Solomon, it's the love story. It's an analogy for the relationship between God and the Jewish people. God is like the bride, the groom, and the Jewish people are like the bride. So for somebody to get along and to have a wonderful relationship, get married to yourself.
I think there's a
That'll be the
certain-
happiest marriage. Be one with yourself, become, and that's it. So we say no. When two people get married, especially a male and a female, and never mind the book, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And spiritually, men and women come from different worlds. We have different spiritual makeup and obligations, not just physically and emotionally we're different, but spiritually and so on. For some reason, specifically, when a man and a woman come together in the Jewish imagination, that becomes one. You were one before. Maybe you're better off alone. But God says not so. In the beginning of the Torah, God says it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make him a helpmate against him, opposite him. Meaning if you use out right properly, then it's a helpmate. And if not, God forbid, it could be the opposite.
Like the dance part.
Uh-huh.
You have a little pressure.
Oh, why not dance by yourself? Then you don't need all the what's it called, the semiography and the right choreography, whatever the case may be. You're much better off alone. It's the easiest way to do it. God obviously thought otherwise, and in fact, He created us, and in fact, He gave us the Torah to unite us with God, and then we become one. But if we were never created, or let's use another idea, if we were just angels. Angels are always one with God, not humans. Humans have to work on it, have to deal with our evil inclination, and so on and so forth. So now we're going to get to this idea, and we only have about 10 minutes left. So we're going to get to this idea in the next two sections here. Oh, welcome, just in time. Moshe, you want to read a little?
Okay.
Number two kinds of unity.
Two kinds of unity. The purpose of the giving of the Torah is indeed unity. But what is true unity? When a person recognizes the one in the many, then he perceives unity in the midst of diversity.
Whoa, okay, whoa. Let's do that slower. When a person recognizes the one, capital one, meaning God, in the many, in other words, pluralism, the world, creation, then he perceives unity in the midst of diversity. So when we see God in the world, that's really truly seeing the one God. Okay, you got a seat, one more extra charge. Go ahead. Moshe, you good?
If he knows only one kind of existence, we do not know what his response will be when he discovers another kind. Perhaps he will then say there are two realities, God and the world. There's only when he has encountered more than one form of existence and still maintains that God is the only reality, that he has seen the true oneness of God.
Beautiful. Go ahead. There's a traditional analogy.
There's a traditional analogy. If we want to know how close is the bond between a prince and his father, the king, we will not discover it in the palace, but only by taking him from it and setting him amongst ordinary people. If he still behaves like a prince, he is the true son of his father. So with the Jew, it's not within the sanctuary, but within the diversity of the world that his sense of God's unity is proved. And he can preserve it in two ways. He can suppress his awareness of other things besides God, or he can be fully aware of the other things in the world and in them discover God. It is the latter which is the deeper response. The person who suppresses his senses and closes his eyes to the ways of the world believes that they may form something apart from and in opposition to God. It must be kept at a distance. The unity of his religious life is neither deep nor secure.
Well, so this is. I apologize to our virtual friends. They're getting bounced around tonight a little bit. Hold on. We'll get it. I think we shut the whole thing off. Hold on. You still there? Here we are. We're still here. Okay. I might be upside down for a moment. It's going to reconfigure. Welcome. So the point of this last thought that Dr. Moshe Engel just shared was that specifically when we have separate things that come together, that is ultimately the true unity. In other words, as I was saying before, to say that there's one God and that he's the ruler and master and the only true existence, when there's nothing else that perceives itself as an existence other than him, is no big deal. The big deal is when we have what seems to be something separate, but we bring it all together. An example, by the way, a great example, an appropriate example is today. Today is Tuesday. What does the Torah tell us about Tuesday? Anyone know? What does it say in Genesis about Tuesday? Very good. My mother's right. It says at the end of each day of creation, God said it was good. He looked back on what he created and he said it was good. If you look carefully in the Torah in Genesis, it does not say that on Monday. It doesn't say anything. But on Tuesday, it says twice God says it is good, from where it became this expression that it's a Yom Shehuchval Bo Kitov. That Tuesday is a day where God doubled Kitov. Kitov, it is good. Kitov, it is good. He said it twice. Why is that? Why doesn't Monday have good, but Tuesday has double good? Because Monday is when division happened. Monday is when the heavens and the earth were separated, as it says in the Torah. And as a result, it's not good. Comes Tuesday, and Tuesday is where things were brought back together. So when things were brought back together, God says twice, Kitov, it is good. What's fascinating though, and that's what ties directly into this, is wait a second, remain with Sunday, or in other words, remain with no world at all. Then you won't have division and then you don't have to bring it back together, back to the relationships. Let a man stay alone, let a woman stay alone, and then you don't have to have this beautiful sermon that every rabbi gives under the chuppah. Two halves of one whole coming together and it's true unity. What true unity? It's he and she, they're different separate entities. They're not similar. As we know, especially as the marriage goes on, they're not similar. So what's this whole talk? Shalom bayis, we come together, we're one whole. Forget about it, stay single. God could have done that. He didn't. He created the world that seems separate, but he brought it back together. And that's what the Torah does. The Torah unifies. Specifically, when there's separateness that's then brought back together, that is true unity. Taking one big piece of wood and saying, oh, look how great I am as a carpenter. I created this one big piece of wood. That's not what a carpenter does. What a carpenter does, look at these beautiful shelves, is took separate pieces of wood, tied it all together to create this. That's unity. It's now one bookshelf. So this is one of the allusions to the fact, as the Talmud says, why the Torah was given specifically in the third month, which is tonight, tomorrow. Rosh Chodesh, Sivan is the beginning of the third month, because it's and as we mentioned, many other threes in the Torah. A people of three, Kohen Levi Yisrael, a Torah of three, Torah Nevi'im Ksuvim, the three parts of the Torah, and given through Moses, who was the third, Miriam, Aaron, Moshe, who's the third born, because it's alluding to this importance of unity, of coming all together. And lastly, we'll conclude with this idea that each of these months, the month of Exodus, Nisan, and then the month of Iyar, which primarily is the month of preparation for the giving of the Torah, the count of the Omer, and so on, spiritual preparation, emotional preparation, and then finally the month that we start tonight, which is when the Jews encamped at the foot of Sinai on this day, as we read in the beginning of tonight's class, chapter 19 of the book of Exodus, on the first day of Sivan, tonight and tomorrow. We now have Moshe with us. His father's yahrzeit is tonight, Rosh Chodesh Sivan, a very holy day when the Jews encamped as one heart, with one thought and one feeling, one desire to receive the Torah. There's something significant about these 3 months. So we'll conclude with this. There are, as we can see, 3 phases in the growth towards the sense of the unity of God, and they correspond to the 3 months from Pesach to Shavuot, because between Pesach and Shavuot, even though it's 7 weeks, we cover 3-month period, because the count of the Omer is the last half of Nisan, the first month, the entirety of the 29, not 30 with the fixed calendar, as we discussed, 29 days of Iyar. Today was the last day of that. And tonight, begins the third month, and the Torah was given on the 6th of Sivan, which happens to coincide with the conclusion of the count as we do it today. But as we mentioned, it didn't always work that way. And if you cross the international date line, you might have it different. So there's significance in these 3 months. Nisan is the month of the Exodus itself, when God was revealed to the Israelites, as we know. And as that we say in the Haggadah, we have to flee from Egypt, literally and metaphorically, fled from the knowledge of the world and were filled only with the revelation from above. What happened when we got the Torah? I'm sorry, not when we got the Torah. When God revealed himself to us at the Exodus, we ran away from Egypt, and the Egyptians ceased to exist in the splitting of the sea, and so on. Their unity was of the world-denying kind. We didn't work with the world. God was one because they knew only one thing, because the world had ceased to have being in their eyes. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is not just God revealed himself and took the Jewish people with an outstretched arm out of Egypt. That's the beginning of the process. That's not the ultimate goal. If they left Egypt and didn't get the Torah, then they wouldn't fulfill the purpose why they left Egypt. So now we come to the next month of Iyar, the second month. This month is wholly taken up with the counting of the Omer, which is not just a count, but it's preparing ourselves for the coming events at Sinai. We are aware of ourselves in our world as something apart from God, which has to be suppressed. Like the example was given earlier, the chariot and its rider, that you have to, the chariot has to be subservient to the rider. God and the world were one, but still two separate things. And finally, we come to tonight, which is the last few days before the giving of the Torah, when the Jewish people spiritually prepared in its completion. Sivan, the third month, as the Torah calls it, Chodesh Hashlishi, in the third month, doesn't even say the name of it, was the time when the Torah was given, when God and the world became one thing. Specifically in the third month, as we discussed, this was the moment of genuine unity, when what had seemed two things became a third, including and going beyond both. I want to go back to the analogy, Moshe, that you gave, Dr. Engel, that you mentioned about the prince leaving the palace, leaving the king, the father. When do you know his loyalty to his father, specifically when he's tempted and when he's away? So the analogy goes back to, actually the Baal Shem Tov shares it with regards to Rosh Hashanah, that the Jewish people are like that prince that the king wanted to tempt to see if he could keep his morals even when he's out in the world. So he sends him away from the palace, and eventually, unfortunately, he falls under temptation, and he even forgets the language and so on. And then the cry of the shofar is when he's coming back, and he's crying out because he doesn't even speak the language, and he's calling to God, and the king, welcomes him back. That's what we do in Rosh Hashanah. But what's behind that is the idea that God specifically created us as humans with an evil inclination, and this started right from the get-go, Adam and Eve. The serpent, the primordial serpent, represents the evil inclination. Just then it was physically outside of us, but after that sin, it came inside of us. We have a little nachash hakadmani, a little serpent inside of us, and that tempts us to sin. And we think of ourselves as bad because of it. No, that means we're human. That's what God wanted. And the challenge is to overcome that, and instead to do what God wants. And that's, quote, true unity. That's the true test. If the prince is loyal to the king when he's not in the palace, when he's in the palace, it's no big deal. As the saying goes, you learn to swim in the water. It's when you're in the challenging times, that's purposely the whole point. And this is why the Torah was given to mortal humans. The Gemara, the Talmud states that the angels argued with God. What are you giving this Torah, your precious gem, to lowlifes, to lowly people? And they didn't want to let Moshe, who came up to get the Torah, leave with it. Eventually, Moshe prevailed. He said, well, let's see what it says in the Torah. It says, honor your father and your mother, right? We just had Mother's Day. And you have a mother? They don't have a mother. Okay, Torah's not for you. It says, do not steal. Do you have a temptation to steal? Thou shalt not covet. You have a desire? No? Okay, so then it's clearly not for you. But what's the deeper idea? The deeper idea is that the Torah is loy b'shamayim. The Torah is not in heaven. The Torah is not meant to remain spiritual. It's meant to come down, which actually has a fascinating application in Jewish law. It's forbidden to fast on Shavuos. You can tell me, Rabbi, you're never allowed to fast on a holiday. It's not true. If you have a bad dream, even on Yom Tif, on Shabbos or Yom Tif, if you have a dream that's really disturbing you, it's called a Tainas Cholim. You wake up Yom Tif or Shabbos morning, you're like, I can't get through this day without fasting to ask God to do tshuva because I feel this dream might happen. You fast. Not on Shavuos. It's forbidden to fast on Shavuos. It says lechem, to you. The Torah has to be you. You have to enjoy it. It's actually customary to eat a little extra in addition to the custom of dairy, which is a custom. But there's Jewish law about eating on Shavuos because the Torah has to be manifested in the physical realm. That's the whole point of the giving of the Torah. And that's represented also in this third month that we begin tonight. The unity of God comes specifically when we have separateness and then we bring it back together. So I'm going to unmute you people. Oh, hello? Still here? Sheldon, Jeff, Jack? So quiet.
Here.
I'm here.
David?
Here.
Okay. Well,
Rabbi,
it's 8:32 and
isn't-
we're actually going to do, what's that?
Isn't every day Mother's Day? Ask your mom.
Every day is Mother's Day and Father's Day.
Mothers have to work
Absolutely.
every day.
Yeah, that's
Even
for
Mother's
sure.
Day. Yeah.
That's definitely for sure. Every day is Mother's Day.
Hello.
But anyway, good evening. So we'll conclude with a
It's
bracha
nice.
and then I'll turn off the Zoom. We're about to do an evening prayer here for Rosh Chodesh, and we also have someone as a yard site. And the bracha I'll conclude with is that as we stand at the beginning of this very special month that we just studied about tonight, the month when the Jews prepared for the giving of the Torah by encamping at the mountain as one man with one desire, very vayichan, as we just discussed earlier. And it's specifically the third month. The Torah could have been given the first month. The calendar could have started with the giving of the Torah. No, it had to be the third because three shows a true unity. We have God, we have the Jews, we have the spiritual, we have the physical, and we bring them together. That is the purpose of the giving of the Torah. So let us do everything we can to prepare for the, once again, receiving the Torah, because receiving the Torah, it's not just, the holiday is not just a date on the calendar when something happened. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's possible for the holiday of Shavuot to not even be on the date of the giving of the Torah. Not today with the fixed calendar, but back when the calendar was done through the sighting of the moon, the 7-week count and self-refinement didn't necessarily fall on the same day as the giving of the Torah, because the giving of the Torah is an individual experience. Even as I mentioned with crossing the international date line, it's possible today for someone to have the date of Shavuot different than the date of the giving of the Torah. They would omit that part in the prayer. It's Ma'amat and Torah saying. So we have to each individually prepare for the receiving of the Torah, which God gives once again every year anew, and each year on a higher level. Because Ma'alim HaKodesh, when it comes to matters of holiness, we go higher and higher. So if God gave us the Torah at such a high level, oh, and one more fascinating thing. Speaking of the specialty of three, this year's date of the giving of the Torah, the year is 3333, because the Torah was given in the year 2448 of creation. What? Right, but it's an emphasis of three in the Jewish calendar. So it's the third month, a people of three, through Moses, who was the third, the Torah of three, and it is given this year on the 3,333rd year since the giving of the Torah. So it's three is a chazaka. This past Shabbos, we said chazak v'nis chazek. We should have the strength spiritually, physically, emotionally, and let's hope and pray that there'll be peace in the land of Israel immediately. We pray for our brothers and sisters. They should be strong, and God should give them everything they need to overcome this current and all challenges. And ultimately, we should have the giving of the Torah with the coming of Mashiach, when there'll be revelations, new parts of the Torah. Torah Chadash Tetzei. May it happen even before Yom Tif. Amen. Good Chodesh, everyone.
Amen.
Thank you all. Those who are on Zoom, we're going to do the evening prayer. So I encourage you to do likewise in the Siddur. It's page 118, and especially to count the Omer. So you could find that on page 136. This past day was 44 of the Omer. I'm not going to say the number afterwards yet, because after Ma'ariv in a few minutes, we'll say it from the Siddur with the blessing. So we have not too many days left, only 5 days. Yom Tif, everyone, and good Chodesh.